Hey there, folks. Welcome back to Eve History. Before we get started on this episode, just want to do a quick notice. There was some audio issues, which is why this VOD was delayed. Those have been sorted, and you may notice a little difference in my voice. That's the only change that happened. I had to re-record sections. But other than that, we're good to go. So sit back and enjoy the history of the Guiding Hand Social Club Heist against Ubiqua Seraph by Tyraxx Thorrk. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Eve History. I am Hendrik Taladar, and this week we got a pretty cool show going on. It's going to be talking about the Guiding Hand Social Club, one of the more notable heists in all of EVE Online's history. It's got a lot of, lore and story behind it. It was one of the top stories submitted to the EVE True Stories competition. And the guy who submitted that story is actually here tonight, and that's Tyraxx Thorrk of Pandemic Legion. He was also a member of Guiding Hand Social Club way back in the day. Tyraxx, how are you this evening?
I'm good, thank you very much. Good to be here.
So before we get started, Tyraxx, why don't you go over your history? Like you've been involved with a lot of EVE history with losing ships and being part of large alliances. So why don't you just give a bit of your background for everyone who doesn't know who you are?
Well, back in 2004, I lost the Gold Magnate, which was a unique ship, which there was only one of. There are actually 4 more than now, but that's just like last month. Then I did the Guiding Hand Social Club thing back in 2005, and since then I was the dictator of the Interstellar Alcohol Conglomerate, which was the second biggest alliance in the game at one point. It was pretty central to some of the bigger conflicts in the game, since we're based in Catch. Then I've just kind of dicked around, stole some motherships. I actually lost the 10th super capital in the game, and which actually belonged to Kernan, but he gave it to me, so whatever. I think that's about it. I haven't really done anything all that interesting since 2009, I guess.
So today's topic is on the Guiding Hand Social Club and its influence within the game, specifically a large heist that was against a very notable faction warfare alliance, or a role-playing alliance. So why don't we talk about the Guiding Hand Social Club and where its origins began?
Well, to start with, it was Black Monkey Corporation, which was just like a corporation, a bunch of us bitter vets at the time, which was like 2004, 2005, created to fly around in on new characters, flying Incursus and Molluses, and just with almost no skill points and just killing people. And we had some fun doing that, and we actually spent a lot of time griefing the first Goon Corps. They had like 6 Goon Corps incarnations before they made the successful one. And we were basically just digging around, having fun. And then at some point we decided to make it a little more serious, and we created the Guiding Hand Social Club, which was a mercenary corporation, which with a focus on espionage and like infiltrating the targets and like providing chat logs and like killing them from the inside, in addition to doing so in space.
Okay, so I'm just double checking if people in the chat can hear me, because there's some comments. Basically, I asked like what the Guiding Hand Social Club was and how did it form and all that, and you answered that very nicely. So basically, it was a group of older players just playing around on newer characters, having fun, and kind of just finding whatever it was that they want to do. So let's get involved with the actual heist itself, and like who was the target and why were they chosen of all the players in EVE at the time? Like why was this person the focus of the Guiding Hand Social Club, and how did that whole contract come to be?
Well, it was the focus of his enemy in the game, which was Muriel was an Australian doctor, and he was the target. And he had made enemies, and actually a lot of them, and he was very unpopular at the time. And I particularly remember Hardin really hated him, and they were both like parts of the Amar role-playing scene, as was I. But our employer, he had some personal history with Muriel, and he got us to help him take Muriel down. And yeah, one of the things that made Gainihan kind of special at the time was that Islan Shogatsu, our figurehead and leader, he would write stories, and he had written a lot of stories for EU Online itself, and like some of the chronicles, and then he had just been very active in the beta, writing all kinds of stories. And he was a very good writer, and he would write stories about the Guiding Hand and about the Tribal Trust of Pator, which was like a connected corporation. And anyway, we got hired by this guy who had a personal issue with Muriel, and we infiltrated Ubiqua Seraph, which was Muriel's corp, and we took about 10 months to do it, I guess. But I wasn't in the entire time, but it was Arnis Zemdal who infiltrated first, and then I joined later to make him look good. And they actually made me a director after I'd only been in the corp now for 9 days, because I was already a celebrity in the game. And I had lost a gold magnate, and everybody knew me.
So you went into Ubiqua Seraph, which was Muriel's alliance, with your main character at the time, or at least presently, Tyraxx Thorrk, and they added you in. So this is more so. This wasn't like a nullsec political issue. This was just a role players versus role players having a little spat over silly things that role players do at the time.
Well, I wouldn't call the employer a role player exactly, although obviously he was. Well, he wasn't. Well, I wouldn't call him a role player exactly. But anyway, he hired us because he had personal issues with Muriel, which I don't remember what it was exactly. It may have been like a corp theft or some kind of scam or something that Muriel had done. But Muriel was an asshole. Anyway, but yeah, Tyraxx was my main character then, and it always has been. And I joined just to make our primary infiltrator look good, because sort of using my celebrity power and all that, and we were both fleet command for the group, and we were both like the best PvPers in the group, and we would go around beating up the role players. And meanwhile, I had infiltrated their enemy role players in Ubiqua Seraph, and had my alt Hamish there, and was actually part of their leadership. And I would sometimes be fleet commanding for both sides at once, and making everybody look bad except for me if I could manage it.
So that had to have taken an immense amount of effort on your part just to pull off. Like if you're FCing for two different groups at the same time, like that's basically like one of the hardest things you can do in EVE as an FC to some degree.
Well, I was just dicking around. I mean, like on one side I wouldn't even have voice comms, so I would be FCing very poorly through chat. And but yeah, we were just dicking around really. Both me and Arnis Zemdal, who were the only people infiltrating really, we were both just having fun with it. And he would get like Moo Corp to come and like fuck with UQS. And Ubiqua Seraph was a corp in an alliance called Aegis Militia. Yeah. And yeah, we had all kinds of fun, and we were basically just building trust and making them realize that we were better than they were, so they would let us decide things for the corp. And I was there. I never actually burned Tyraxx as part of the infiltration. I was just there to make Arnis look good. Then it was him that did the backstabbing. So, like, I joined, they instantly made me director, like 9 days later, but they still hadn't made him director, even though he'd been in for like 4 or 5 months longer, and was by far the best PvPer there, and like a very smart guy. That was a digital communist who was later famous in Band of Brothers. He arranged like the D2 Titan loss, which was like the second Titan to die in the game, and he did a lot of shit for Bob.
So with Muriel being kind of in charge of Ubiqua Seraph, and I got it wrong, it wasn't his alliance, it's actually his corporation, and he corrected me on that. What was their overall importance in the game at the time itself? Like, because we talked about the role-playing aspect, but like, were they like a big name? Were they leading a huge portion of the community? Like, what was their role? Or were they just a random person that had just rubbed people the wrong way, and eventually they just got their comeuppance?
Muriel was the CEO of a corp, and the corp was the main corp in an alliance, and the alliance was like the second biggest Amar role-player alliance. So they were significant in the role-playing scene. When they were kind of big. I mean, they weren't as big as CVA, but they were the second biggest of the MR groups, and they were relevant to some extent. They weren't huge or anything, but they were pretty rich. They had a Ishtar BPO that we stole, and a bunch of other stuff. They were pretty rich and kind of powerful.
And through that rich and that power, they came across or they came into owning a very rare apocalypse ship. Why don't you talk about that? Because that was a big part of the heist. Was
No, they just had a Navy apocalypse actually. It was nothing that special. It was like, yeah, it was nothing that special. But we killed it with an Imperial issue apocalypse.
that was where.
Yeah, and Arnis bought that with partially with money that Muriel had loaned him.
So let's talk about that apocalypse, because that was a very rare ship at the time.
Yeah, it's the only one left actually. The one that Digital Communist on his character Arnis Zemtel used to kill Muriel. Yeah, there were only 4 of those to start with, and 2 or 3 of them have died since then. I lost one of them, and Grickle lost one of them to Moo, and one of them has like an unknown death, which I'm pretty sure it died, but who knows. And the last one is just sitting on Digital Communist's inactive accounts, and he rarely logs in, I think. But those were super rare, and they would sell for like 4 trillion ISK now or something. Who knows?
And they were, at the time at least, in terms of game balance, they were also a fairly powerful ship, kind of on par with, like, say, a tournament prize ship or something like that, right?
Yeah, they had like well, they weren't that powerful. They had like a extra low slot, and I don't think they had an extra mid slot at the time, but they got one later. They were just basically an apocalypse with some more buffer and capacitor and stuff. We actually had an Armageddon there too to help kill the Navy apocalypse. I just brought one of my characters in an Armageddon to give more DPS.
And so you guys decided to, or you're paid to attack and infiltrate Ubiquoseraph and Aegis Militia.
We were basically paid to get Muriel's corpse and to grief him, and we ended up having to like smart bomb his pod because he always logged off as soon as his ship died. It was like a exploit he used all the time, because at the time you could just log off and your pod would instantly warp away, and there was no way to catch it except with smart bombs.
Sorry. So what was the whole progression of the heist when you got approached within the Guiding Hand Social Club? They came to you. They asked for Muriel's corpse. What was the steps that were involved with the infiltration? You mentioned that your friend had already been in there for a couple months, and he was supposed to pull off the main heist, but he just didn't get enough roles or whatever, and you came in, and 9 days in you were director. So, like, what happened after that point going forward that like led to Muriel's death?
Well, we had to get them to unlock all their blueprint originals because they had them locked down with votes. So basically, Arnis and I, we became sort of the leaders of the Corp for their wars, and we basically convinced everyone that we needed to move the blueprints to somewhere else as a better staging area. And Arnis became a director like not that long after I did, so me joining to make him look good went quite well. And he's a very good player. He joined Moot Corp afterwards, and then was one of the most useful guys in Brothers later. But we got them to unlock all the beef blueprints and move them, and then we stole them all and killed Muriel in his fancy ship, and with the ship we had bought for money he loaned us, and popped all his fancy implants and got his corpse, which was the sort of main goal. The main goal was obviously just to get his corpse, so that the employer also wanted us to hurt Muriel as much as we could, which didn't really work because I think all this worked out kind of well for especially his corpse. They became much stronger afterwards.
Well, let's talk about that. How did they become much stronger afterwards, after they were infiltrated and attacked and betrayed in this manner?
Well, they got some stuff stolen from them, and their CEO got killed, but it's just stuff. And no press is bad press, so they got a lot of attention from it. So I don't know. They did quite well afterwards. I think it may have been bad for Muriel himself. I'm not sure how much longer he kept playing the game. He was never all that popular.
And so, talking about the heist again, how could things have gone terrible for you? Like how could the entire plan just fallen apart? Like was there any moments where you're like, we may actually get caught here doing this, or was it very like kind of smooth sailing, you still flew under the radar, no one noticed you doing it?
Nah, it was really easy. I mean, really the only way something could have gone wrong was if somebody from the guiding hand had like snitched or something. I mean, there was nothing to mess up really. We were just having fun, killing stuff, and making ourselves look good. And as a result, they trusted us more and more and wanted us to make the decisions for them. And so we did. And it didn't end up very well for them in the short run, at least.
So,
and, like,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like I had my alt in their enemy group, so we were fighting ourselves, or I was fighting myself. And we were just doing all kinds of fun stuff, and we were just playing the game and having fun, which is what you kind of have to do if you want to infiltrate properly and be really active.
And with the heist having played out, and you stole, I forget how much money it was specifically, this started to make its rounds across not only like the Eve community, because like there was public statements made by GHSC. There was also public statements made by Muriel, and there's retorts on like the old Chaos forums and stuff like that that sadly are lost to time unless they're still up on Eve Offline. But there was a huge legacy because it kind of got picked up by PC Gamer did an article that we see on the screen right now. They put a digital version up that there was like, and it was actually in the printed version back in 2005, but not only in the UK but in the US. Escapist magazine did their own article, and it's become this like huge part of Eve lore. So let's talk about that legacy. Like, what was your reaction when you found out that this like in-game act that you did that you admit wasn't like super hard or difficult to do ended up being like this huge story in video game press in a regard that kind of Eve had never seen before?
Yeah, it was just it was because Istvan was such a good storyteller. I mean, he talked to the journalist, the PC Gamer guy, and they actually printed 4 pages about it in PC Gamer in their offline issue, and then put it online. And then later they printed in the US issue also. And this went like all over. It was in Der Spiegel, which is some huge German paper, and it was in the New York Times and Slashdot and The Escapist, and it was everywhere on the internet. And like it was just a cool story, and Istvan presented it really well, and it was like $16,000 worth of stuff at the time. But so it was a pretty good theft, and it was just presented in a very cool manner. And what we actually did in the game was also very cool. Like we're using the Imperial issue Apocalypse to kill a Navy issue Apocalypse. And of course, people always got confused and thought we had killed an Imperial Apocalypse.
Yeah, and it became such a part of like the Eve culture that like Jeff Rader was mentioning on his stream just before we started our show today, that this story like it reached enough people that like people actually started playing Eve because of this story, because of how well it was told.
Like the Mittani, he started because of this. Elise Randolph started because of this. Graf Telkin started because of this. Shadow started because of this. There are like thousands and thousands of people that started playing because they heard about the game through this, and they thought it sounded cool because it's a cool story.
And you actually like tried to continue the lore and the legacy of this story by submitting it to the True Stories competition that CCP ran 2 or 3 years ago, which is where the His Regards comic story came out, where they're starting up the Eve Comics stuff with Dark Horse Comics, and so they started turning player stories into actual comic books and supposedly into future television show episodes. So like, do you look forward to seeing like your name and like this whole process playing out on like a comic book page written and drawn by like famous people who do comics, and potentially even a TV show? Or is it more like it's still going to be like kind of just chill and laid back attitude towards it all?
It's definitely chill and laid back, but it would be cool. I would definitely enjoy that. Yeah, but the story definitely deserved to win that thing, but Goons had their voting block against it, so the only stories that were higher were the ones with the Goon voting block.
Oh, that's a fair assessment. So what ultimately happened with everyone involved? Like, what happened to Muriel? You mentioned that they stopped playing. What happened to Ubiqua Seraph, or even the Guiding Hand Social Club? Like, what was the fallout from all of this, and like how long after did you like stay involved with the Guiding Hand Social Club and doing these sort of activities?
I'm still CEO of the Guiding Hand Social Club, but it's been kind of inactive for a long time. There's still a few people who log in now and then. We used to do the Alliance tournament all the time. We did multiple Alliance tournaments with the Guiding Hand guys, and it's only like a couple of years ago that Istvan stopped logging in at all and kind of left the internet. But Muriel quit many years ago, quit the game. It wasn't that long after the heist, like a few years, I guess. But there's still some Guiding Hand guys around, and UQS was a pretty big corp for a long time, but I don't think they exist anymore. But they got stronger afterwards, and they kept doing their thing. And they were around for a long time. But Guiding Hand, we did the tournaments, and we did a bunch of other contracts, and we made a lot of Iskov, the reputation we had made there. We got hired for things, and we stole things, and we did our espionage and mercenary stuff for a while. But I kind of got busy with the whole IAC thing, and so I wasn't like putting all that much of my time into Guiding Hand. I was busy running an alliance.
So with Guiding Hand Social Club, this whole story, it was the person who contacted you guys, as far as I understand, is not known. Like even 11 years after the event, like Guiding Hand Social Club hasn't revealed it, at least in forms of like interviews or whatever, as far as I can understand from what I've seen. And I assume you guys aren't going to ever reveal it because that'd be kind of silly. But do you think that adds to the mystique? Because like that's kind of cool that like no one really knows who this guy was that hired you, but you pulled off like an amazing heist that took 10 months, almost a year.
Yeah, 10 months, a year, something like that. I don't remember, but we were just having fun. But yeah, of course, the employer gets to maintain his secrecy unless he wants to reveal himself. But he was very happy with the results, and it all went quite well.
And you mentioned that you guys had continued on doing various espionage stuff. Was Guiding Hand Social Club involved in any of like the other notable events in EVE history, or was it more just you guys didn't quite make a big of a splash as you did with the ubiquitous Seraph heist?
No comment.
Well, there you go. All right, so at this point, we kind of reached the end of my list of questions. So we're gonna turn it over to chat and ask them, what they want to know about the Guiding Hand Social Club or the heist. Like, do you have any other stuff you can talk about the Guiding Hand, or like any of the people involved? You mentioned that someone was involved with Bob to a degree.
Yeah, Ernest Zemdahl, the guy who was infiltrating UQS for longer than I was, he was another of his characters was called Digital Communist, and he was, for instance, the one responsible for D2 losing their first Titan to Bob, where he smart on it right before it logged off, so it had aggro, and it's a really gay kill. But yeah, he was a power player, Bob, New Corp. Other guys, I mean, Istvan wrote more stories. He was always pretty cool. Had fun with the role-playing scene until he stopped playing. Not really much to say about other Guiding Hand members, but we had some fun. And we did a bunch more jobs, but nothing like very public. I mean, sometimes we would like make press releases when we stole a mothership or something like that, but like a lot of the jobs we did were like secret or we were like doing stuff behind the scenes, and the employer didn't want it public.
So with the legacy of this all, like how do you feel that the not to get into too specific of a detail, but like how do you feel that the whole infiltration and scamming scene and ecosystem within EVE has changed since 2005? Because that's a long period of time for various mechanics to change, various cultures within EVE to have changed over that period. How do you feel nowadays things compared to back when you were doing it with Guiding Hand Social Club?
I don't think it's really changed at all. It's basically the same.
So
people still do corp thefts. People still infiltrate. People are more aware of it, perhaps because of us, and they try to like combat it. And You do all kinds of real life information, and some groups have some pretty amazingly sophisticated anti-spy stuff going on, but it hasn't really changed.
And does it still like kind of like bring you a bit of pride when you see someone say like I did this because back when I first started, or Guiding Hand Social Club, the whole Ubiquitous Eros heist, that's what got me into Eve. And you're like, man, I helped make that history happen by just doing this thing in a game that caused someone else to do something 10 years later.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. Like, I mean, people like the Mittani and Elise Randolph playing because of me is ridiculous. But yeah, it's always cool when you hear a mention or that we were inspiration for something. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I was actually completely unaware that the Mittani actually joined because of the whole Guiding Hand Social Club thing. I thought it was like something else, but that actually kind of makes sense given his whole persona and everything he's been associated with over the years.
Yeah, I
So
mean, Kugutsumin also joined because of that, and he was like got in touch with us and wanted to join and play with us, but we were too inactive to do anything with him.
And for those that don't know, Kagutsumin was the player who hacked into Band of Brothers forums. He found out about the T20 scandal. He exposed it. He was like a big part of EVE history because of various things he did that were tangentially related to what Guiding Hand Social Club did. So,
Yeah, he was a real life hacker too, like Black Hat.
I did not know that either, but that would actually make sense, given what he's done over the years and the whole Band of Brothers thing. So, with that, I don't believe we have any questions in chat, unfortunately. Uh, do you have anything like final to say about the whole Guiding Hand Social Club? Do you feel like there's something else that you kind of want to like address with regards to it that you haven't had an opportunity to over the years, or is it just more of like we still did this thing, it was an amazing thing, we're still probably the best group that have ever done it, like that sort of thing, or is it more of a well, there's the one thing that I've always seen people say that I want to address.
Um, I don't know. I'm